this was me. Would have been worse me. It was peaceful. Okay. I love these. Great, you guys are all in a great mood. Sometimes I do this before my lessons, and it's like in the red. I'm like,
because you got us food and
yeah, right. Thanks. So today we're doing this last-minute lunch and learn. So we have this video I'm going to show you. A documentary called Upstanders, and it is on cyberbullying and kind of how to combat that. It's 54 minutes long, so it's a little bit longer video. We got this video in January of last year to show to our 6th graders and their parents. And we did have it in the evening, and so we had a couple of panelists. One was local. His name is Dr. Ram Chetar. He's out of KU, and he's a child psychiatrist expert who knows a lot about this field and specializes. But we could not get him for lunch today because he's got patients. So we will most likely not be renewing this subscription. So I wanted to make sure that we got the most out of it. So that's why we're showing it again to 6th graders this year, and we decided to do this last-minute lunch and learn. So at your table, you have kind of a pamphlet of discussion questions. At the end, we'll kind of go over those, but I want to give them to you now so you can maybe follow along if you want to during the video. Yeah, should we get started?
Sure.
Okay. So I will tell you, I'll preface this with, there is some uncomfortable stuff that you all will be seeing or hearing about. This is 54 minutes. Tomorrow, they will get an edited version that'll be 34 minutes without some of the graphic stuff that you will hear about. And it's regarding suicide, so that's why this warning is here.
And you said just 6th grade watches it tomorrow?
Uh-huh. Because of time, I'm going to plow through this, but you all are free to get up. And there's macaroons over there if you want some for dessert after lunch, drinks, whatever you need. And then we'll talk after.
I came home from school one day. I lived in the outskirts of Chicago, Illinois. And I remember reading online this story of this 12-year-old girl. And her name was Rebecca Sedgwick. She had been cyberbullied for over a year and a half. At some point, she decided she just couldn't take it any longer. So one day on her way to school, she climbed to the top of her town's water tower, and she jumped off. How could a girl, one younger than myself, be pushed to take her own life? And to me, it just seemed completely unacceptable that it was something that we all felt a little bad about. And we went home and it was on to the next thing. I think in that moment, I realized I really couldn't be a bystander to this problem anymore.
I at first didn't want to tell anyone because I thought, oh, they're just words. I can get through this.
I was being bullied all the time. It was from like a range of all things, from like my skin color to my hair, to like what clothes I was wearing.
They didn't want to invite him, so he stepped on the cake and they stole his glasses and started chasing him. And then because he couldn't see right, they tripped him.
My daughter has been experiencing some girl drama at school, and it's made her recently not want to come to school. It's hard. It's heartbreaking as a parent to not be able to fix it, to not know what to do. She actually walked out of our apartment and she was upset, but I said, well, I hope everything goes better today, and I'm sorry, and you know that I'm here to listen and I'm going to try to help. A few minutes later, she came back in the door and she said to me, Mom, I just need a hug. Can I just have one more hug before I do this again today?
When I think about my experiences with being bullied or bullying in the past, what really comes up most for me is how I bullied myself. And this is something that I've been doing since I was really as long as I can remember, I've been really tough on myself.
I still remember the student who picked on me daily. I also remember picking on other kids daily. At that time, just seen as this is a part of how things are going to be.
Within the past couple years, it was the group of seniors, older individuals, were consistently reported to be the loneliest cohort of people. It's shifted for the first time ever. The loneliest cohort of people are now 25 and under.
What's been found is that when there's mental health consultation to early care and education centers, that there's significant decrease in daycare expulsion. But daycare expulsion has gotten to be actually epidemic, and there's more daycare expulsion in kindergarten and below than in all the rest of school.
The abuse is just almost normal. We've just grown up in like this weird situation where we can be as impulsive as we want, and we don't have to wait a day to say something to someone at school. We don't have to tell everybody to meet like at the gym to beat them up or something. Like, it's just like immediately, if I'm mad and I want to say something or how I feel, like I can, and it's pretty powerful.
Met David when we were 6th grade, 7th grade, about that time that we both had Coach McLaren as our select basketball coach. Wasn't hard making friends with David at that time.
David was my youngest son, and he was just a great kid, you know, adventurous, and he wanted to be like his brothers.
He was the stereotypical mischievous kid brother who, was just trying to run with the big boys. Just about everything he tried to do, he ended up doing pretty well.
We went hunting a lot and spent a lot of time in the country and went to ball games, and so he was really the only one around that wanted to spend some time with his dad. So we had a great relationship.
He liked being the center of attention with his friends. He's always doing outrageous things. I saw a video of him the other day where he swallowed an entire cupcake in about 10 seconds.
You know, he was my last child at home, and we were enjoying the fact that we were able to spend so much time with him. So we did everything with him. I mean, he was our life. And so when we found out about the cyberbullying, that's when, we took him to the therapist and knew that he needed to have some help to be able to get through it.
The definition of bullying typically takes on 3 different criteria. One is a power differential, one is repeated negative acts, and the third is an intent to harm.
Those 3 components look very different in online contexts than they do offline. So for example, cyberbullying that occurs via text message is obviously going to look very different than cyberbullying that occurs via Instagram.
The whole, ideology on it, where, the kid's, beating you up and, taking your lunch money, that's, bullying or whatever, but it can also just be, excluding people.
And this girl, she was a junior in high school, and she shared that she had this group of friends. Something had happened, and they basically kicked her out of the group. Since that, they've created this system for her online on her Instagram. So if she doesn't get X amount of likes on her pictures or X amount of new followers a week, they ghost her at school. She's not allowed to sit with them at lunch. She's not invited to the parties. She's excommunicated if she doesn't meet that number. If she does, then they acknowledge her. She shared that she spends hours after school creating new accounts, fake accounts, so that she can like her own pictures and follow herself so that she meets that number.
Everyone has the ability to be mean and rude because, you have off days sometimes and you just don't want to deal with things. But if you're a bully, it means that you've internalized kind of the negative things in your life, and you're actively trying to make people like have a bad day and feel worse.
What you will find is that bullying is fundamentally driven by the attention of peers. And power can be defined as your ability to access peer attention. Kids are trying to figure out how they can get more peer attention. And they try different ways. And whatever way works, they do more of that.
We should always think about social development first and how natural negative emotions are, and wanting power as children is very, very normal. And social cruelty happens because of all of this focus on friendship and who's in the group and who's out of the group.
If somebody's more popular, they're more powerful than the victim. If somebody is bigger and physically stronger, they are more powerful than the victim. But what does a power differential look like in an online context?
If I can click like, or I can post something that gets a lot of likes, I have a lot of power. And that's one of the reasons you see the increase in cyber level bullying, because it's so easy to access that peer attention.
One of the big differences is that, when you leave school or you leave a certain area, you can kind of walk away from it. But with cyberbullying now, there's so many different ways that it follows you 24 hours a day.
I think bullying is probably the darkest part of humanity, of being human. It's this sort of dark side of ourselves that comes out when we are hurt and when we are wounded. A lot of people don't grow out of bullying in some ways. Like, people can be bullied and it affects them their whole lives. It affects their relationship, it affects their work, it affects the way they see themselves.
We all have insecurities. We all pick apart things within ourselves, and how do you expect to have healthy friendships and relationships with other people if you don't first have that with yourself? We've all been bullies at some point. We've all, whether it's talking behind your friends' backs, participating in gossip, and that's not something that ends in middle school. Like, that's part of the human experience.
We have to cope with the world we're in, right? And so if you thought there's two minds in us, there's the lower mind, which will survive anything. And we as human beings are incredible. We'll survive anything. But how do we survive? We fracture ourselves. We push things away, we bury things, we deny things, we minimize things, we justify things, we blame ourselves. But then you have to ask yourself, a fractured self is not a full self.
When an individual is being bullied, this results in the occurrence of the flight, fight, or fear response. In fact, there's a part of our brain that's associated with what we call executive control. And this allows us to make good judgments. And when you're scared or frightened, that shuts down.
Exposure to bullying can change the brain. It activates stress hormones, which can have a really negative effect on the body when you're chronically activated.
Physically, to people, they go into this hyperdrive in their amygdala, where the brain secretes cortisol to keep them hypervigilant so that they're ready for the next time this happens. Their muscles clench up, their hands and feet get cold, their heart starts pounding, their necks get tighter, and they suffer significantly from all sorts of physical and emotional expressions.
To attend, to learn, you have to be present. And that means present in the moment. Yet in these situations, what happens is either a child is reliving what has occurred in the past with this individual, or is terrified of what might happen in the future.
If around you you're in an environment where everyone is always bullying other people, you may think, oh, that's just how it goes. You say mean things to other people, that's how you make it in this world.
Now that you can be anonymous, do it late at night with high velocity, get the Instagram feed going and go, 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 go. It's unleashed the worst side of our natures.
Our kids are navigating a new world that we did not have to navigate. And now we have another piece involved. We have this screen that allows us to be completely detached from what's actually happening.
If you walk through the world thinking, oh, nobody cares about me, why should I care about anyone else? That's just a sign of disconnection, and that isn't how humans are built. Like, they are built to connect. They are built to live in community. So what is it that is disrupting connection? I don't know the answer to that, but I do see that disconnection is fundamentally the problem.
The other thing is that when we think about bullying and we think about why people are so mean to each other in the world today, so many of us are living in a nervous system state and having a physiological reaction that is far from who we really are. When people are showing up in that way, it's really tough to show up with love. It's really tough to have a level head, to have empathy, to consider someone's feelings or to consider the other side of a situation. I just think it's really important that we're understanding what stress is doing to us as leaders, as parents, as students, as friends, as bullies.
And for many, many people, they are constantly having this threat response engaged at a low level.
I think that when we spend so much time comparing ourselves to other people and feeling like we need to be achieving a certain amount to be happy, we start to get really tough on ourselves when we're really just on our own path. Doing things our own way, at our own speed, at our own pace, with our own color and texture and insight is what makes us so beautifully ourselves.
I first learned about the cyberbullying one night where there was an Instagram post and David came running down into our bedroom crying and screaming that, you know, his life was over and he was never going to be able to go back to school. I got out of bed and I sat on the floor with him to try to understand what was going on, and that's when he showed me his phone.
It was attacks about him, his looks, and there were physical threats to him. Put him in a body bag, put him in a coffin.
I remember them saying, they were calling him an ape. They were saying, let's put him 6 feet under.
So that night of the Instagram post, he was so distraught that he could barely even hold a conversation with me. And so all I said to him was, I want you to take screenshots of all of it, and I want you to send them to me. And I found out that it had been going on for months, that he just didn't tell us. And then it all kind of made sense of like he was dealing with this really heavy thing that was happening to him. He didn't know how to tell us. He probably didn't think that we could make it stop or make it go away, or he thought, I mean, he told us he thought we were going to take his phone away from him.
A couple of weeks into the break, we have Christmas and things seem pretty normal. I guess several days later was the first time I had been there while he had been targeted online. I guess we were all upstairs playing some game. He seemed to be having fun and talkative, but then he sort of just got quiet for enough for a significant period of time, enough so that you could notice like something changed in the room. You could feel it. He shows Cliff and I what he had been added to some group message with a bunch of phone numbers that he didn't have in his contact list. And they were, they added him, they all send, 4 or 5 messages each, all very insulting, very immature. So they say all these things and they kick him out. Very brave. He doesn't have these numbers, and so he's like, oh man, like people at school don't like me. Now these random people I don't even know don't like me. Like, there's no point for me, is what I imagine was going through his head.
I think by that point in time, he had undergone so much abuse that his entire perception of self had changed, and he was much more vulnerable to those sort of attacks, and I think a lot of the people bullying him knew that.
I knew why he wasn't there, and it bothered me.
I wanted to say something, I wanted to do something, but it's hard to step up and take on that role.
One person can start something, and one person can, get angry, and unfortunately that person had people that were willing to follow him.
The cyberbullying continued even after David changed schools, and he no longer had social media, but he did still have his phone. And so what kids would do is they would take screenshots of it and send that to him through regular text.
He didn't want to go to class. He didn't want to go to the cafeteria. And he just didn't give it a chance.
It was a Sunday night. He goes in his room. I opened my door, and his door's open, the lights on. I wasn't in his room. I go into Mom's room, and David's on bed. You know,